Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So last class was very chaotic. I looked at the video. It's my fault because of the ijaza situation. So hopefully, barakallahu fi. So hopefully this time we will try to be a little bit more on point, inshallah. The last class basically was introducing the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, which we know is narrated in Sahih Muslim and is one of those axiomatic ahadith. So there are some hadith that are so significant that they have their own name. So that's one of those hadith. It's called Hadith Jibreel, obviously, because of Jibreel. And Jibreel alayhi salam comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asks him 4 questions. He asks him what is Islam, what is Iman, what is Ihsan, and the signs of the final hour. And then we dissected that hadith. That's basically all we did, to show that each of the, well, at the end of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, هَذَا جِبْرِيل جَاءَ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. That's one narration, or جَاءَ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ أَمْرَ دِينَكُمْ. The important thing is the Prophet ﷺ explicitly said that all of those 4 things, that equals Islam, as in the religion. So our Islam is not complete unless we understand what those 4 areas are. And then we said there's really 3 areas because the signs of the final hour are, or what we call in the science of religion, eschatology, the study of, or the teachings of what happens at the end of time and life after death. That is part of theology. So therefore, there are 3 main pillars to our faith. The Islam in the hadith, that is, corresponds to the legal sciences. And I explained to you that the legal sciences is not just one discipline, but there are multiple disciplines. Basically, there are 2 halves. There are the usul, the basis of how we interpret the Quran and Sunnah, and the result of that interpretation, which is the furu', the branches, the points of law. And then in addition, we have other corollary or tools that we use, ulum al-ala, tools that we use to interpret the language of the Sharia, which of course is the Arabic language. So we talked about the study of words, the study of what the words mean, the study of the morphology of the words, the study of the words in a sentence, and how the sentences are understood. All of those are the sciences of the Arabic language. And we talked about that there was over 85 schools of Islamic law throughout Islamic history. Today there are 8 that are the ones that most people follow, but historically there have been over 85. And all of the points of law gathered together are about 1.5 million points of law. And then we talked about theology, and then we said in the space of theology, the points of theology are less. There's about 1,200 points of theology, but they're very deep subjects because they deal with issues of theology of Allah Ta'ala, etc., and the Prophets alayhi salam. And in the world of Sunni Islam, we have the 2 schools of Sunni theology, the Ash'ari and the Maturidi school. And of course, the Shia have their own school, which is a little bit based on the Mu'tazilite school, but also they have their own theology to that. And then we come to the heart of our discussion, which is the Prophet being asked ﷺ about ihsan, about perfection or excellence. And the Prophet ﷺ said, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَهُوَ يَرَاكَ. To worship Allah as if you see Him, and if you do not know that He sees you. So this subject that we are dedicating these classes to is this subject, ihsan. Now, one of the things, I know this is a review, but because the last class was so chaotic, I felt I should review it. One of the things that I also mentioned to you, I hope that you'll remember, is when we talk about Islamic law, the Sharia, we said that only a minority of the verses of the Quran and only a minority of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ actually deal with the Sharia. So there's only about 300 to 400 verses in the Quran that are verses that deal with the Sharia. And there's only about 2,000 hadith out of 120,000 hadith or 100,000 hadith that deal with the Sharia. The Quran, of course, is 6,236 verses. So if you do the math, less than 3% of the Quran and the hadith deal with Islamic law. So therefore, the subjects of theology and the subjects of ihsan, what we're talking about, is the bulk of the actual revelation. The bulk of what a Muslim does on a day-to-day basis is to concern themselves with this subject. Okay, so that's kind of what we did last time. There is a pedagogical tool that we have in the Islamic sciences that every science has, they're called al-mabadi al-ashar, the 10 things of each science that are explained for students, such as the name, who started the science, why do we study it, what's its benefit, where does it come from, these type of, I'm going to read them for you right now. And every single Islamic discipline has this pedagogical tool, and this is usually how we study. So in what we're doing, these classes, did I talk to you about theory and application last class? Okay, because I'm recording for the university, also a course on tasawwuf. I can't remember if I talked to you, if I did it to the camera. Okay, so let me talk about that first before we do the mabadi. You just said yes, yani, no matter what. Ji ha, yeah, ji. Madad, ji. Okay, there is the theoretical study of these sciences, right? So let's take, for example, grammar. So grammar is, an important science. I know people don't like it, but it's very, very important. So there's the theory of Arabic grammar, of how the sentence structure works, what are the different tenses, what are the different cases, etc. That's theoretical. But it's not enough to study a science theoretically, you have to apply it. So how do you apply that science? You apply it by doing a grammatical study of the Quran, which is called A'rab al-Quran. And many of the ulama have done that. They'll take every single verse of the Quran and they'll analyze it grammatically and tell you what each verse, what this word is, what kind of part of the speech it is. Islamic law. You study Islamic law, you study a madhab, any of the madahib, you learn about how Islamic law works, what the major issues are, you learn about the usul, etc. But then how do you apply Islamic law? Where is the application of Islamic law? It's in the fatwa literature. So every madhab or every major jurist has their own fatwa collection. Imam al-Ghazali has a fatwa collection. Imam al-Nawawi, in my madhab, Imam al-Nawawi has a fatwa collection. And if you read those works, you'll see how Islamic law is applied. So as we talked about the different Islamic sciences in the last lecture, also remember that there is the theoretical study of or the theoretical approach to a science, and then the application. In these courses, I am presenting to you the theoretical contours of Islamic spirituality. When we get into the book of the Risala, which will start after, in the new year, inshallah, that's going to be more on the application side. How was Tazkiyah applied historically throughout Islam? It was applied through the Sufi orders, the different turuq al-Sufiyya. That's how this was applied. So everything in Islam is based on the Quran and Sunnah. There's no doubt about that. But you can't study a science unless you know how the people of that science apply it. The people that study hadith, for example, where do you can study, okay, this is how the hadith work, and this is what a chain of transmission is, and these are the different authors. But how do you exercise the application? When you go to a book and you do a critical edition, it's called Takhrij al-Hadith. So Imam al-Iraqi, he took Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya Ulum al-Din, and he did that. He went through all of the traditions that Imam al-Ghazali mentioned, and he said, okay, this one is sound, this one is weak, or this one is in this, I couldn't find where he got this from. That's the application of the science of hadith. So tasawwuf or tazkiyah, it's the same thing. It's based on the Quran and Sunnah, but it's theoretically, but then it's applied. So when we come to apply it, we're going to talk, when we get to the book, we're going to talk about real, like life. How do you deal with this stuff in real life? How do you apply this stuff in real life? Okay, so what are the 10 introductory definitions to this science so we can understand? So they're summarized in this very short 4 lines of poem, in Arabic, of course. من رام فنا فليقدم أولا علما بحده وموضوع تلا وواضع ونسبة وما استمد منه وفضله وحكم يعتمد واسم وما أفاد والمسائل فتلك 10 للمنى وسائل وبعضهم منها على البعض اقتصر ومن يكن يدري جميعها انتصر. So these 4 lines of poetry give us the 4 things that every science, whether it's tafsir or hadith or logic or grammar, these are the 10 things that you have to know about those sciences to understand like what's going on. So the first thing is al-hadd. Al-hadd is a definition. And a definition is something that incorporates into the definition all of the necessary components of that item, and it excludes everything that's not related to it. So what is the definition of Tazkiyah? What's the definition of Tasawwuf? It's the science that explores the rank of ihsan that's in the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam. That's the definition of Islamic spirituality, Tazkiyah. We'll get to the fact that they all have different names. So that's the definition. So what is the definition of Tasawwuf? It's exploring what the Prophet ﷺ meant when he answered the question about ihsan in the hadith of Gabriel alayhi salam. Okay, what is the subject of this subject? Science, al-mawdu'a. What are the issues that are talked about in this? The works of the heart that relate to the level of ihsan. So, Islamic law deals with outward conduct. How you pray, how you make wudu, how you pay zakah, how you transact marriage, divorce, inheritance, outward actions. But then there's also your disposition of how your heart is. Yani there's the inner meaning of how you're supposed to act. What happens if you pray and you're showing off? But you still prayed. So Islamic law is dealing with just the outside. Okay, he prayed dhuhr, khalas, check the box, you prayed dhuhr. But then ihsan is saying, well, did you pray because you're showing off? Did you pray and your mind was wandering? Did you pray and you were in khushu'ah, you were sincere? Did you pray and you were distracted? Did you, so on and so forth. That's the matter of the heart. As it relates to the level of ihsan that's in the hadith of Gabriel alayhi salam. So, in the subject of tasawwuf, we talk about the heart, how we are, the state that we are in when we do the things that Allah has asked us to do and the Prophet ﷺ has asked us to do. Because it's not enough just to pray and fast and pay your zakah outwardly. That's not enough. Because the Prophet ﷺ said the Khawarij, they do that more than we do that. They pray more than we pray. They fast more than we fast. They read the Quran more than we read the Quran. But he said, but the Quran doesn't go beyond their throats. It doesn't penetrate their hearts. And they pass through this world the way that the arrow passes through the bow. And they're inconsequential. So in this, all of the hadith about the Khawarij, which are many hadith, in all of the major collections of hadith, the major collections of hadith, the Prophet ﷺ describes the Khawarij as being people of quantity. He said, تَحْقُرُونَ صَلَاتَكُمْ إِلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ وَصِيَامَكُمْ إِلَى صِيَامِهِمْ. You see them pray, and you see your prayer as nothing. Al-Haqir is something that's very small and insignificant. So he says, you see how much they pray, they're praying all the time, and you're like, I don't pray like that. And then you see they're fasting all the time, you say, I don't fast like that. They're always reading the Quran, and say, I don't read the Quran like that. But the Prophet ﷺ said the exact opposite, but they're the worst of people. He said, Tuba liman qatalahum wa qatal. Glad tidings to the person amongst us who kills the Khawarij and is killed by them. The Prophet ﷺ ordered us to fight the Khawarij. But yet they pray a lot, they fast a lot, they read the Quran a lot, but the Quran hasn't penetrated their heart. Right? When the Prophet ﷺ said there's a morsel in your body, if it's good, everything will be good. And what did he said? The heart. When he talked about taqwa, he said, "At-taqwa ha-huna." This is where taqwa is, it's in the heart. So again, tasawwuf then talks about the actions of the heart. How can I not be like the Khawarij? How can I pray and get from my prayer? How can I fast and I get from my fast? How can I do what I need to do, but I'm not showing off? But I'm jealous of this person. I can't lower my gaze. I hate this person. I'm always angry. How do you deal with these things? Right? That's the vast majority of the verses in the Quran, the vast majority of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. That's what it talks about. Okay, so that's the subject matter of this science. Al-Wadi', who is the originator of this science? When we talk about the originator, of course, everything goes back to Rasulullah ﷺ. But what we mean by that is who is the person that organized this as a science? So there's two answers to that question. One answer is Imam al-Junayd, radiyallahu anhu, who is from the Salaf. So we refer to Imam al-Junayd as Sayyid al-Ta'ifa. He is the leader of this group, the leader of the Sufis, the leader of the people, the ulama of tasawwuf. They all hail back to Imam Al-Junayd radiyallahu anhu. And when we talk about good tasawwuf versus bad tasawwuf, because there's a lot of bad tasawwuf, we'll get into that. There's a lot of crazy stuff. I know that. And I know that I use the word tasawwuf, probably some people are uncomfortable. But that's, again, this is a monologue, so I get to speak, and then you guys, after I'm finished, then we can dialogue. But there's a lot of bad tasawwuf. So how do we say what's good and what's not? Is we say it's the tasawwuf of Imam Al-Junayd. The principles laid down by Imam Al-Junayd. Because Imam Al-Junayd, he said, radiyallahu anhu, طَرِيقُنَا هَذَا مُقَيَّدٌ بِالْقُرْآنِ وَالسُّنَّةِ. He said, or بِالْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ. He said, our path to Allah Ta'ala is guarded by, is surrounded by the Qur'an and the Sunnah. If something is that we do is not based on the Qur'an and the Sunnah, then it's not from this path, and it's not from, it's a bid'ah. But we want only what's in the Qur'an and the Sunnah. So that's one answer, that Imam Al-Junayd. But academically, the first book or the major book written that codifies this science is the Risala of Imam Al-Qushayri radiyallahu anhu, the book that we're going to study and read. Alhamdulillah, it's translated, and in a couple of weeks, right after New Year's, we'll start that book, inshallah. So Abu Qasim Al-Qushayri, he is considered the first or the most consequential to write. His book is very comprehensive. That's why we're going to go through. It's one of the great books of Islam. And he was a known scholar. He has a tafsir. He has other works. When he went to like the Hajj, I think it was with Imam Al-Ghazali's Sheikh Al-Juwayni. I think he was with them. Like they all went, and everyone's like, oh, you make dua for us. He was considered the pious, he was considered a saintly person. And his book, therefore, is like the main book that talks about everything. When we talk about usul al-fiqh, who do we say is the first person to write about usul al-fiqh? Who? La, Imam al-Shafi'i, right? So Imam al-Shafi'i, we say, is the first to write usul al-fiqh. He wrote the Risala. That doesn't mean that there was no usul al-fiqh before Imam al-Shafi'i. It just means that he was the first to sit down and codify it and articulate it and use the vocabulary, etc. Right? So this is Imam Al-Qushayri. So we talked about the definition, the subject, the originator. Now it's nisbah, its relationship to the other Sharia sciences. What is the relationship of Tazkiyah to the other Sharia sciences? It is from the Sharia sciences, not the rational sciences. So in Islam, we have two groups of sciences. We have al-ulum al-shar'iyya, the Sharia sciences, and we call them al-ulum al-naqliyya, sciences that are transmitted, because they are transmitted in an unbroken chain of transmission back to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then we have al-ulum al-aqliyya, we have the rational sciences, such as logic and grammar and these type of things. So which one of is Tazkiyah? It's a Sharia science. It's not a rational science. It's a Sharia science. So if you want to be trained in the Sharia sciences, this is one of the sciences that you have to study. You cannot be an alim if you do not study tasawwuf. Just like you can't be an alim if you don't study tafsir, or if you don't study hadith, or if you don't study fiqh. People that don't study these things, their Islam is not complete at all. Okay, number 5 is its sources, mastumid. What are the sources of the sciences? As I just said to you, Imam Al-Junayd said that this science is based on the Qur'an and the Sunnah. In addition to the experience, the practical experience of the ulama of the science. And that's important to underscore, because the verses of the Qur'an are enumerated, 6,236. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ are enumerated. But our situations, our current situation, or anybody's current situation, is ongoing, always new. We have new situations. Like now we're a minority in a country, but we have equal rights as citizens theoretically, but actually not really. But we're protected officially, but really not really. So that's a new situation, right? So that's not in the Quran and Sunnah. I mean, the principles of that exist in the Quran and Sunnah, but what is that? So we need to look at the experience of the people before us in this science, just like we would in any other science. So how did they deal with times of calamity? How did they deal with the changing of political fortune and empire? How did they deal with this? How did they deal with that? So it's based on the Quran and Sunnah and the interpretation of the ulama of this science, of the principles of this science in the past. So we don't discard the past, we build on what we have in the past. So one of the things that we study, and as a matter of fact, in the book, the Risala, the first maybe 100 pages, all it is biographies of the main people of the science at the time of Imam al-Qushayri, radiallahu anhu. So reading about, and they're not like, I don't want you to think they're like, 700-page biographies. Sometimes it's just like a couple of lines or a paragraph or a story. But it's very important that you learn about how these people lived, because they did amazing things. I remember one story I read, I think it was in a book by Al-Ghazali, and I can't remember who it was, but he was talking about a saintly man, and he said that he only ate a certain type of porridge. He only ate like one meal a day, and he only ate a certain type of porridge because he realized that this meal saved him the most time. He used to demarcate his time by his tasbih. So he said, if I do the porridge, it saves me like 70 tasbih. But if I prepare the food another way, it costs me 70. I was like, wow, I was embarrassed. I think I was eating while I read that. I just kind of, I was like, I don't want to eat. Astaghfirullah. It doesn't work. You can't. It only lasts a day. Then you go back to eating like 5 meals a day. But anyway, knowing those things, it's important because then you see, okay, this is how people reacted. This is how these people actually lived like this. Another man, somebody came to knock on, to call on him, and his wife answered, and he's like, oh, he is in his wird of sleeping. And he even considered sleeping as an act of worship. So he budgeted his time. This is when I'm going to take a nap, because this is how I have extra energy to make qiyamul layl. So this is like a religious act. So because it's a religious act, I can't be disturbed in it. I mean, most of us just crash at night and that's it. We don't think about, the dhikr that you say before you sleep. So knowing the biography of these people is important because you see how they implemented these teachings. So that's number 5, the sources. Number 6, fadlihi. What's the worth? What's the benefit of studying Tazkiyah? Well, obviously, it's very high because the Prophet ﷺ said that's the goal. The goal is to worship Allah as if you see Him. And if you don't, then know that He sees you. So how do we do that? That's the benefit. That's why we're talking about this. What is the ruling, the hukum? Number 7, the ruling of studying this. Some of the sciences, everyone has to learn them. Like everyone has to learn how to make wudu. Everyone has to learn how to pray. But does everybody have to study this? This is considered what we call a fardu kifaya. So it's enough that some of the community learn it and then they can teach it to the rest. As far as the academic study of tasawwuf, which is what I'm doing for you now. But from the point of view of implementing this in your individual life, everyone has to implement tazkiyah. Because this is part of why the Prophet ﷺ was sent to humanity. This is not like a fringe thing. This is not an other. He was sent to purify us. لِيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ الْحَقِّ. That's the khutbah I gave a couple of weeks ago. Okay, number 8, its name. Now, number 7 is the ruling of studying it. Al-hukm. We said it's fard kifaya. Number 8 is the name. Many sciences in Islam have multiple names, like theology. Theology can be called aqidah, it can be called tawheed, it can be called kalam, ilm al-kalam, it can be called usul al-din. Like in Al-Azhar we call it usul al-din, but in other places, but all of those are the same subject. Some of the mantiq is mantiq, logic is logic. Nahu is nahu, grammar is grammar. But this is one of the subjects that has sciences that has multiple names. In the Islamic university, it's called tasawwuf. That's what it's called. But it's also called tazkiyah, or it's called ilm al-ihsan, the science of ihsan, or just ihsan, or matharat al-qulub, the purification of the heart. All of those are interchangeable. If you add, we have a concept when we teach, we call it the Islamic library, al-maktabatul islamiyya. So if you had an Islamic library, this massive space that had all of the books that were ever written in Islam, you would have to catalog things what would the books of this subject, what would the title be? It would be called Tasawwuf. That's usually the name that it's called. Sometimes it's called Fiqh al-Qulub, the fiqh of the heart. All of those are interchangeable. And when it comes to studying a science, there's no right name or wrong name. It doesn't really matter. I usually call it Tasawwuf because that's how I was trained. I was trained at Al-Azhar, and this is sort of what we call. But all of those other names are fine. Tazkiyah, Ihsan, so on and so forth. So it has multiple names. And usually, when something has multiple names in Islam, and especially in the Arabic language, it's a sign that that thing is important. So that's one of the things that, and why is it called Tasawwuf? Where does the word Tasawwuf come from? There are over 1,000 explanations. I'm not going to go through them, but there's over 1,000 explanations. The most common explanation is it comes from the people of the bench, Ahlul Suffah, which was a special group of the Sahaba the author of Hilyatul Awliya. Who wrote Hilyatul Awliya? Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Al-Asfahani. He says that there were over 100 of them, of the Sahaba. Abu Hurairah was one of them. The Suffah was like a bench outside the Prophet's house, alayhi salatu wasalam. And these Sahaba, they just hung out there. They didn't work. They had nothing. They were dirt poor, but all they did is they dedicated their lives to shadowing the Prophet ﷺ and learning from him everything that there was to learn. And the community would support them. And I mean, the stories of the endurance that they had to go through to be able to do it was very, tying the rock on your stomach and things like that. So some people say that the word tasawwuf comes from Ahlul Suffah, because it's the same word. Some people say tasawwuf comes from the word suf, which means wool, because they wore coarse wool, over a jubba. Like this is a jubba, they wore a coarse wool jubba. Some people will say that tasawwuf is related to the Latin word sophos, so for knowledge. Yeah, there are 1,000 explanations. Some people say that it comes from tasfiyah, from purity, to purify the heart, so on and so forth. But as I said, all of those names are interchangeable. It doesn't matter what we call it. What matters is what we're, with the subject matter and what it deals with, etc. Okay, that was number 8. Number 9, the thamira. What's the benefit of studying this? Well, obviously the benefit is that you become nearer in your worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You become a better person. You become the better you. That's the benefit of this. And number 10, al-masail, the subject headings. What are the line items? What are the subheadings that we are going to study underneath purification of the heart? They are all of the things that either benefit the heart or harm the heart as we travel through life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a lot of things. But when we come to the book, we will see that there are groupings. About gatherings, about being by yourself, about eating less, sleeping less, talking less, things like, so some things you need to do more of, some things we need to do less of. There are those are the things, the tools that help us become more aware of Allah Ta'ala as we live our life, etc. Okay, so these are the 10 introductory teachings of this science, and we do this with any new science that we teach, so people sort of have the parameters of what we're trying to accomplish. Before I move on, are there any questions? Ten, the definition is number 1. Number 2 is the subject. Number 3 is the originator, who was the first to write. Number 4 is its relationship to other Sharia sciences, the nisbah. Number 5 are the sources. Number 6 are the benefit or the worth of this subject. Number 7 is the hukum, the ruling of studying the subject. Number 8 is the name. Number 9 is the benefit. And number 10 is the subject headings, the masail. No. I mean, yes and no. You have to know about it. You have to know about what to do and what not to do. But that's only going to get you so far. It's just like saying, I want to learn to read the Quran. Can I learn to read the Quran without a teacher? You can learn a little bit, but you can't really get good at it if you don't have a teacher. Same thing with any of the sciences and the subjects. So, yes, it's theoretically possible, but practically it's not practical.
The group of people and in this group, so they had no family, no other work. But I mean, they were just really poor, and community supported them. Is it the main reason why, like this, in this day and age, Sufis mostly, they try to live on other most?
No. That's false logic. La, la, la. Ahl Sufa, these were people that Allah Ta'ala had prepared them for this task to take from the, like Abu Huraira. Abu Huraira is the most Sahabi to narrate the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, but for him to be able to do that, he had to dedicate his life to this. So this is very different than, the pir is in the mosque and we feed it. This is different. That's lazy. So that's the guy's a bum. That's something else. You have to. That's not what we're talking about. That's why I said there's a lot of dirt and dust that we have to clear the way. I'm talking about, that's why some people say where the name comes from.
Blockchain technology, right, that is used, for example, cryptocurrencies, they are using it. Basically, Islam, can say that they discovered that. What you say is kind of defining blockchain. It's very difficult to change anything to increase the basic reliability of the hadith and,
Yeah, this is our science of verification, yes.
Basically, blockchain, it is first
to verify, yes. So our way of verifying the truth versus not the truth is the chain of transmission. And Abdullah bin Mubarak, he says, he's from the Salaf, he said, Al-isnadu min ad-din, walawla al-isnadu laqala man sha'a ma sha'a. These chains of transmission are our religion, and if we didn't have them, anybody could say whatever they wanted to say. So everything that we say, everything that we teach is an unbroken chain back to the Prophet ﷺ, multiple chains to verify that what we're saying is not made up and things like that. Yeah, so that was our version. And of course, at the time, that didn't really exist in the world. No one really cared about that. But for us, we are obsessed with that. I mean, we are obsessed with verifying that the Quran is the Quran in its script and its recitation. And there are 10 recitations of the Quran. So we have 10 batches of chains of transmission to verify how the Quran sounds, and then the script, so and the hadith, so on and so for all of the sciences. So this is something that's an obsession for Islam. So the early Muslims, they didn't ask themselves, they didn't say, okay, I know I'm right. They said, how do I know that I'm right? So this tawthiq, this idea of verification, is a critical component of the Muslim intellect and the Muslim identity. Yeah.
You. Could the books replace that teacher?
The books can replace that teacher, your own spiritual practice. I mean, Allah is generous, anything can happen. But you have to, you have to approach it, the way we're approaching it. I mean, you have to learn about it. It's not like, okay. No, it's not like that. This is serious stuff, because this is the bulk of our religion is this. The bulk of the religion is not fiqh and hadith. This is the bulk of the religion, how to be a better person. So if we don't each of us take that seriously, then we are leaving a major part of our what our religion is asking us to do. So it's very important that we have some parameters.
You mentioned that we'll start a book in a couple of weeks. Would you be able to repeat the name so we can?
The Risala of Imam al-Qushayri. And there's a PDF online. I'll share it with everybody. There are 2 translations that I found. Actually, I just learned of a third one. I don't have the third one, but there are 2 translations. I'm going to be reading from the Alexander Knish translation because that's the one I found online that I can share with everyone as a PDF. I don't know if it's good or not. I usually prepare from the Arabic and then I read the English when we're in class, and we can troubleshoot it, but that's the plan, inshallah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
I've heard this before, but I'm not sure how true it is. So, and the Tazkiyah as well. So, are these things, Iman, Islam, Iman, and the Ihsan, prerequisite of each other? For Tazkiyah, do we have prerequisite for example, for Tasawwuf? You have to have the strong basic that you need to be very firm in your ibadat before you reach to Tazkiyah or something.
It's not binary. Everything is based on the Quran and Sunnah. So if you believe in the Quran and Sunnah, then you have to implement the Quran and Sunnah through the Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. That's all it is. So there's action. You wake up in the morning, you have to make wudu, you have to pray your namaz, etc. Ramadan is coming, you have to fast. Then something bad happens. How are you going to react to it with your belief? Do you ask Allah? Do you think Allah is like a big person in the sky? I mean, that's haram, that you can't have that. So do you believe that you're going to die and there's Yawm al-Qiyamah? That's your i'tiqad, that's your belief. And how you carry yourself. So all of them are all at the same time. But they're all based on the Quran and Sunnah. Nothing can go.
It all has to exist at one time.
Of course, yes. It's not like, when you become 13, then we can, induct you into this. It's not like the Freemasons or something like that. These are all false notions. Inshallah, we will do away with that. This is Islam. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And because Tasawwuf deals with how you are, and you are as long as you are alive, therefore it's a primary thing. It's not a secondary thing. You see what I'm saying? Like right now, you don't need to worry about prayer until tomorrow, Fajr, because we just prayed Salat al-Isha. But all of the stuff we're talking about now, between now and the time you sleep, you're going to have to deal with it. You see? So this subject permeates the 98% of your day is dealing with this subject.
Tasawwuf is something which have a very small portion of people, they have to deal with it. You have to have strong.
Because we have two enemies. One enemy is the goofy Sufi. Okay, so we have a lot of that from the time of the Salaf, or not the Salaf, but from like the year. Well, yeah, from the time of the Salaf, we have the goofy Sufi. The guy that just wants to stay in the mosque and you have to give me money. Okay. The guy that takes money to make dua for you, and all of these are weird practices. So when educated people, I say educated because, see that, they're like, oh, this is like lazy, right? And then the other enemy is, modernism and the modern reform attempts of Islam, that started like with the Wahhabi movement and stuff like that. But they attacked this stuff. Eventually they attacked Tazkiyah, and they attacked this as a, I don't know, not part of Islam or something, and then they compartmentalized Islam. I mean, there's a whole reason and how they got to that. They didn't start by attacking Islam, they started by attacking Aqidah. And then they started by attacking the madhahib of fiqh, and then they started by attacking Tasawwuf itself. So those are the two enemies. Why there's a lot of, people that have a negative notion about it. Now, people that have a secular education, they're also at a great disadvantage when it comes to Tasawwuf. Because you'll hear some of these things and you're like, oh, but I have to work, but I have to earn a living. I didn't say anything about earning a living or not. We're talking about how your heart is, man. You're at work, you have a heart. Isn't your heart beating when you're at work? Aren't you interacting with people? So this is a very, I think somebody even said that already, this is a common misconception. So people that have a modern secular education, especially people that are not trained in the humanities, Unfortunately, I know it's probably the vast majority of people, they have a big disadvantage. Because this whole concept of spirituality, it's like too goofy and loose and, like, just teach us Islam. This is Islam. This is Islam. This is what we're talking. This is Islam. This was the majority of the Sahaba. How many Sahaba, if there was 100,000 Sahaba at the time of the passing of the Prophet, how many Sahaba of the 100,000 were experts in the Sharia? Somebody answer. Not you guys. Everybody? 1,000? 10? There was no more, maximum 20 mujtahids amongst the Sahaba. That's it. Sayyidah Aisha, alayhi salam, Imam Ali, of course, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, radiallahu anhu, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Mas'ud, the people that the other companions wanted to ask questions. So all of the other companions, they don't count? No, why are they important? Because of this. Because they understood this and they acted upon it. See, so even statistically, from the number of the companions, even the expert Sharia stuff, even a small minority of the companions were experts. So this is Islam. Right? This is what we're supposed to be doing. When we say I'm a Muslim, this is what we're talking about. Yeah, you have to pray and you have to fast, of course. That goes without saying. But then how are you all the time? How are you with your neighbors? How are you with your coworkers? How are you with your spouse? Are you present when you pray? Do you have hypocrisy? Do you say something but hide something else? I mean, that's scary stuff, right? That's what purification of the heart deals with. So our two enemies as we go through this is going to be the bad Sufi actors, the people that give tasawwuf a bad name because whatever, they're milking money from the community or I don't know, whatever the case may be, and the non-Sunni practices. I mean, there are Sufis that will, poke themselves with a knife and stuff. I mean, there's stuff like that all the time, right? And then there is the problem of modernity itself, where we're very material. We don't care about the metaphysical. We want everything to be measured. But this is not about that. As a matter of fact, if you are stuck in the material space, you will not be able to understand the subject, because this is dealing with the heart and how you are, and to have an opening as you are. As you are outwardly, nothing is going to change. Your work, your job, your social responsibility, nothing. The Sufis of our ummah, the people that we talk about, they came from all walks of life. They fought in wars. They were merchants. Ibn Arabi, the great Sufi, Andalusian Sufi, Sheikh Al-Akbar, he says, when I was in Mecca, I saw the strangest thing. I was making tawaf around the Kaaba, and I saw an old man, hanging by the cover of the Kaaba, hanging and crying. And I was like, MashaAllah, man, And I got closer and I heard him, and he was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the dunya. He wanted more money and more this and more that. And then just after I finished tawaf, I was in the marketplace and I saw a young man, and he was buying and selling and buying and selling, and I was paying attention to him, and his tongue was constantly making the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is not about you have to dress a certain way, or you have to leave your job and live in the mosque, and then we're going to support. Don't live in the mosque. You can't live in the mosque. That's mamnu. We don't have that. Go work. Go do something. Or you can work at the mosque. That's different. Right? So this is not about the outward appearance. This is about the inward appearance.
I need this. Okay. So we were talking about the purpose of the creation, which is, first, so that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And secondly, it's about insha, making the world. And the third one is more about the Tazkiyah itself, right? So it's just, when I think about it, it feels like it's like an obligation to learn.
Yes, so we were created for this.
For this,
I mean,
exactly.
that will be for next week, but yes, we were created to do this. Just like we were created to pray, worship, and we were created to work in community, we were also created to purify ourselves.
And then also kind of increasing our levels as we're thinking in our relationship with
Because
Allah.
the work that we do with the bigger community, is only going to be as effective as we are. So what we bring to the table, what the me is how good that thing is going to be.
Right.
I mean, people talk about like the current political environment. Well, this was to be expected. I mean, go back 40, 50 years ago and see how people were talking then. You get what you pay for, and this is what America is now just become like this big thing of like consumer thing, and that's why the political leaders are like that. Like no one actually talks about political principles. No one talks about what the Constitution means and what the framers meant. No one talks like that. They're just all sound bites, right? Because that's the way society has become. So the quality of our politics is a direct result of the quality of those individuals, those politicians. So if I don't work on myself all the time, then when we come to work with somebody, either whether it's your jobs or a community or whatever the case may be, the county, the state, then it's only going to be as good as each individual person is. So for that work to be worthy of civilization, to be worthy that we are the Khalifa of Allah Ta'ala, we have to polish ourselves to be the best version of ourselves.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So that will be next week when we talk about why that is and where that comes from.
And you were also in one of your speeches talking about orthodoxy and orthopraxy, which
That was last class, yeah.
okay, which goes back to the hadith of Jibril.
Yeah, so Islam in the hadith of Jibril is praxis, is conduct. So following the Sharia is orthopraxy. And then Iman in the hadith is belief. So that's orthodoxy. So having correct belief in Allah, His angels, His books, His prophets, the final hour, destiny, etc.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. We'll pause here, inshallah, and then next week we'll talk a little bit more. We have a couple of more weeks of these kind of introductory remarks. It will take us right past Christmas, and then right after the New Year's, we'll start with the new book, inshallah. So this is the game plan for the next few weeks. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكر وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون.